Hello, and good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Red Dot Cafe. I'm really excited about today's conversation. Thank you all so much for taking a moment out of your day to be a part of our special series. We hope this live stream adds value and inspiration to your daily life. I'm Angelica Cordero, TEDxSanAntonio's licensee, and I'll be your host for today's event. We want everyone to take part in this conversation, so please leave your questions and comments in the feed, and we'll make sure to bring them up to the speakers at the end. As they chat, I'll be monitoring the feed so we can highlight those questions and comments. We're happy to be joined today by Dr. Gage Paine of Gage Paine Consulting and CEO of Camp Champions, the outdoor school Steve Baskin. Back in 2012, Gage gave us tools to build silence in our interpersonal working and community conversations. That same year, Steve argued that unplugging cultivates the skills needed for face-to-face situations. Today, they join us to reflect on their talks, life since speaking, and to share how to unplug and find silence during physical distancing. Please join me in welcoming Gage and Steve.
Hello.
Hi, guys. I'm looking so forward to this conversation, and I don't want to take much time, so I'll pass it off to the both of you to talk a little bit about your TEDx experience and what life has been like since speaking.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, as Angelica said, my name is Gage Paine, and 2012 feels like forever ago right now. It's hard to believe how long ago we had this opportunity. I have to say that doing the TEDx San Antonio talk was one of the most nervous times I've ever been in giving a speech. And I have given a lot of speeches over my career, but that one was a little intimidating, I have to admit. And maybe today is too. But it was a great experience. And the people that I got to meet through that experience were really wonderful. And when Angelica talked about doing this opportunity, I immediately thought of Steve because I had so enjoyed his talk. And I thought that the two of us together had some interesting ways of thinking about silence and connection and opportunities to find our way through difficult times. And so it seemed like a good topic for today. And so I'm really excited an opportunity to have this conversation with Steve. So Steve, tell us about you.
Well, first of all, I'm just honored to be with such a guest company. And I, like you, found the TEDx speaking experience exhilarating and intimidating. And the memory I always tell people is they will say, hey, it's not a speech. It's a TED Talk. It should be a conversation, but practice it 14 different times. Be relaxed, but don't go over your time limit. And I remember just kind of, so you're casually talking off the top of your head, word for word, a speech you've memorized.
That's right.
But then once you got past that, you got the joy of hearing talks like yours and some of the other people that brought their own insights. And not only was that an exhilarating experience, but one of the other TED speakers at that time was the then head of the KIPP school in San Antonio. And we ended up doing a partnership with them to see if a week of summer camp would help them integrate non-cognitive skills in a way that maybe an academic environment would not happen. So I would never have met you. I would have not had a chance to spend time with Mark. And I would not have been terrified had we not been together 8 years ago.
It's true. Angelica asked us to talk a little bit about since then. I, at the time, was Vice President for Student Affairs at UT San Antonio, moved shortly after this to UT Austin as Vice President, and then left to do consulting and now do my own consulting in educational and leadership development, where I try to take some of what I will talk about today into the work that we do to give people different ways of thinking about what it is to be a leader in our organizations and communities. And listening, which requires great comfort in silence, is one of the most important skills I think a leader can have. And so I think that's one of the reasons this topic is important today. How about you, Steve?
Well, I've been sort of doing the same thing, although the same thing's never the same thing. I still am running summer camps, and have been particularly focused in an odd way, in a very parallel path to your own, is that the area of camp that I love the most is working with our high school leadership program in our college kids. Now we have kids as young as first grade, and they're working on unplugging and just having a great time at camp. But as the kids get to a certain cognitive level, we get an opportunity to help refine what it means to be a leader, what it means to truly connect and to lead. And a huge part of that, as you so articulately stated, is listening. That there is no effective leadership when you're doing all the talking, ever.
Right. Yeah. So I suggested that we have this conversation because I'm really curious about what the lessons you have learned and articulated in the speech from the camp experience bring to what the time we find ourselves in right now. Because as I recall it, and I did look at it yesterday, you talk a lot about interpersonal one-on-one. You tell this wonderful story about a counselor sitting down and looking right in the face of you, as I recall, and welcoming you. And so, but we can't do that right now. But I still think there are transferable lessons and opportunities. And I'm just curious what you think the camp experience brings into this time of disruption and hard times as we're all socially distant from each other.
I think it has helped me see sort of a third category. I used to sort of see the camp world as a totally unplugged one, right? And then you have the kind of a prototypical iGen technology cocoon, where you're constantly wired and plugged in, and you're scrolling through your Instagram feed or looking at your Snapchat stories. And now we have to think about another category. There's a category where we are connected, and I would argue that second category really isn't true connection. And we can go into that if we think that's useful. The Instagram scroll is not connection.
Yeah, I agree.
A hug is real connection. We can't hug. So what is it that's essential to connection? And I think it connects to work like yours or Brene Brown's. It's empathy, it's listening, it's hearing and telling stories.
Yep, I agree.
And if I strive to know who you are, that's what we need to do. And it's maybe the difference between a tweet and a long form podcast. Right? A tweet plays to anger and simplicity. A long form podcast plays to subtlety and nuance and story. So I guess what I want to challenge people is to make time for the stories, make time for the silence, which is the piece that's been missing for me. I've been checking in with a lot of different people, but I find myself starting the conversations very aggressively, very rapidly.
Yeah.
And then thinking I got to move on to the next one instead of giving air.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really challenging anytime, but particularly now, is that time, that pause to give people a moment to collect their own thoughts and to, we're culturally uncomfortable with dead air in a conversation. And I suspect we're even more so in this kind of an environment, that there's somebody on the other end and you're sitting here and you're looking at each other on the screen. And what happens if both of you are quiet for a moment? You wonder if the screen froze, right? We're just not used to what just happened here when we were both quiet. And so finding a space to let people share emotion, this isn't the great way to do that, right? And so, how do we create that space? I think over time we had some skills about sharing emotion over phone calls, but I'm not sure we have that anymore, at least for folks who are younger than I am. And so, how do we share emotion with people outside our house? Because when we are confined this way, the opportunity, we need to share it someplace else. We can't just all be kind of rolling around together. And so how do we share emotion with people outside our house and honor what they're experiencing and allow space for what we're experiencing between each other? And I particularly think about people who are home alone. They're single, and so their house isn't full. And what they may say, oh, I don't need more silence. It's too quiet here. But there's silence and then there's silence, right? And, is there a way to sit and breathe and acknowledge what you're feeling right now? And then is there a place to share that? And I think we've got to find that in these interesting days.
There's a lot to unpack there, but let me start with the last thing you said, is I think I would recommend to people to sort of in their mind, understand the difference between loneliness and solitude.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a really profound difference. Like solitude is being comfortable, being with yourself in silence.
Yeah.
And at peace. And it's a great time for mindfulness, or just a time to, sit looking at a sunset, or just on an ottoman, right? But it's a time when you are alone but not lonely.
Yeah.
Loneliness is the danger.
Yeah,
being alone
absolutely.
is not.
Yeah.
So once they got that definitional terms, then I'm seeing your question with a sub question. What age group are we talking about? Mm-hmm. If it's seniors, they have experience of speaking on a phone, and a Zoom is maybe more personal than that.
Right.
If it's a teenager, I'm really worried because they don't make phone calls.
Right.
Partly because, and this is sort of a weird corollary to your silence theory, is that they're terrified of real-time responses.
Yeah.
And they want that 4 to 8 seconds to curate the perfect response on Snapchat. So the idea of sort of spontaneous connection and communication is a skill, if not absent, it's certainly in deficit.
Yeah.
And so I am not practiced in talking to a person face to face and being available and emotional. So if I can't do it face to face, can I do it on the screen?
Right. Yeah. It may be. I mean, and that's the interesting thing. I think we need to be open to exploring the different ways to do this. And for me, no matter what, that there's that opportunity to be who you really are with someone. And I have learned from the students I've worked with over the years that it isn't an either or. There are benefits to the text messaging that I had to learn, right?
Yes.
There are benefits to the face-to-face dealing with the hard subjects that others have to learn. And so I don't think it's an either or, but I do think creating, back to part of your original conversation, was creating skills that allow us to be effective and be honest and be open in a variety of different settings and through a variety of different mechanisms. Because the reality is this is going to be our mechanism for a while. And it may, again, as we talk about different waves, this may not be the only time in the recent future that we have to go into some isolation and some distancing from each other physically. But aren't we lucky that we have Zoom and live stream and text chat? That we have some mechanisms to stay connected one way or the other, rather than, just think about 1918 or polio, when kids never left their backyards, right? We have some mechanisms to be connected to the world in a way that can be really positive, depending on how we choose. And that, for me, I guess, is part of it, is being thoughtful in our choices and taking some time for ourselves in the midst of everything.
I think maybe part of it is deciding how you're going to interpret it.
Yeah.
I attended a memorial service for a friend who passed away last week, unrelated to COVID. He had cancer for a while. And the family ran a memorial service all on Zoom. And they were both sad that we weren't there to hug.
Right.
but amazingly appreciative of the fact that there were 100 people. And were they going to be able to have 100 people from, 80 different locations, all be able to make it, at the time? So they chose, rather than to see it as a time we couldn't hug, they said, we will hug in October when we have another memorial service.
Right. Yeah.
But today, isn't it wonderful that we all get to be together?
Yeah. Because presence matters, right?
It does.
And this is a form of presence for each other. And I think that's an important piece of this. Yeah.
I think another, I'm going to think out loud with you on this one because I really haven't really formed it, is, first of all, understanding what your needs are.
Mm-hmm.
I am a highly social introvert, which means I need very little. If I have my family or one or two friends, and I can be vulnerable and honest and connect with them, my cup is full.
Yeah.
Now, I'm in the camp business, so some of my directors are diehard extroverts, and they're saying, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do?"
Right.
So I think first you have to understand what your needs are.
Yeah.
And if you're more like you and me, you pick one or two people.
Yeah.
And you check in regularly.
Yeah.
That's been my coping mechanism. I have the one person that I can pick up my complaints or my worries from the day before without having to resurrect them.
Right.
I'd actually would love to hear what people's who are more extroverted strategies are.
Yeah.
Who don't have the advantage, for example, my directors who can call every single one of the counselors who wants to work this summer and just check in with them. They have an excuse to FaceTime with other people.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts? Do you know anyone who's a diehard extrovert who is?
I've seen a number of virtual happy hours out there. End of the day, let's all get together. And what's interesting about that is the ones that I'm aware of have been across the country. And so within the profession of student affairs, which is what I pay most attention to in my life and career and work world, there are people who know each other who would have gotten together at our national conference a couple of weeks ago who couldn't do that. We didn't get to do our hugs. It got canceled. It was supposed to be in Austin, and we had to cancel it. And so instead, they get together once or twice a year at national events. Instead, they're doing virtual happy hours. So they're having an opportunity to connect and a reason to do it in a way they might not have thought of otherwise, right? And so they get together at the end of the workday, and everybody brings their beverage of choice, and they catch up. And so, a virtual happy hour, how cool is that?
Well, and actually, what's clever about it, it's kind of like the memorial service.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. It has in what way is Zoom advantaged?
Right.
Well, it's advantaged that you are in Austin and I'm in Marble Falls, but you could be in Bangalore.
That's right.
And are there high school friends or college friends or family members that you want to keep in touch with that, what are you going to do? They live in Boca Raton.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I really learned the advantage of Facebook years ago, was when a friend from college got together a group of us on Facebook who all moved into the same residence hall at the same time several years ago. And for the last 10 years, we get together in Norman for a football game to enjoy, being together. And, we knew each other forever ago, but we've reconnected through Facebook and now in real life. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get to have our reunion this year, but I bet we do something on Zoom. And so, it allows for different kinds of opportunities. So it's an interesting reality here.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons we as humans resist change is that whenever I describe a change situation, you're acutely aware of what you're going to lose.
That's right.
But we're not acutely aware of what we're going to gain. And the best analogy in my world is the first-time camper. What they know is, well, mom's not going to be there, dad's not going to be there, and the puppy's not going to be there, and my house is not going to be there, and maybe I can bring my stuffed animal.
Yeah.
And they're going to go into this black box, and they have no idea what's in this black box. And then they go and they find there's new friends and great counselors and these activities and independence and confidence. And it's a wonderful thing. And if they'd seen both choices, it would have been easy to say yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the same thing's here is right now we're all acutely aware of what we can't do.
That's right.
I can't go to the gym.
That's right.
I can't hug, my friends. I can't go on this conference I wanted to go and speak with these people. All right, great. What can you do? And if it's connecting with your friends, or if it's developing habits like the ones you suggested in your TED Talk, know.
Well, and that's the other piece of this, is there a way to create space for yourself? Because that's the other thing I've seen as I've watched this unfold on social media and in the news and those sorts of things, particularly for people that are home with families, is how difficult this really is to manage all the needs coming at you and still work from home for the people that are doing that. And so, whatever your situation is, finding a moment to just be quiet and breathe is really important. And I know if you've got little ones, you're going to say, I can't do that, but so get them to breathe with you. I mean, I've seen some great things over the years where schools teach kids to meditate, and not in any serious way. They teach them to focus on their breath. And wouldn't that be wonderful if you and 3 kids and your partner sat down and took time to breathe together for 5 minutes? There's a real subtle but important emotional and psychological connection that would happen if people did that. And it changes the patterns. And so finding ways to bring a little silence, to bring a little focus on your breath, alone or with all the people that you're sharing space with, I think is an important coping skill for what we're going to be going through, because this isn't a short-term problem. Again, in the world that I watched, everybody spent a lot of time really frantically solving the immediate problem. And that's easy to do, relatively speaking. Now it's the longer haul. And it's what are you going to do, and what patterns are you going to create? What habits are you going to create that will serve you well here and might serve you well later on in the future as well?
I love that.
Yeah.
And especially if you have kids, one of the challenges is they're going to think that being silent with a parent is maybe like getting a paper cut and shoving your hand in some lemon juice. So I would frame it in a way, the same way we frame being tech-free is not a deficit, but a power.
Right.
We in the Paine household have the power
to choose. Silent. That's right. And we get to choose
to be silent, and we can be silent with our breath. Other people are terrified of it. Yeah. In fact, we do have an exercise at camp where I make all the boys' side walk from one place to another. It's about 150 feet in silence until everyone's seated, which takes about 8 minutes. And I swear they experience this. It's like 45 days, like lost in the wilderness kind of experience, because there's no music. Right. Forced to listen to the birds or the, laughter coming from the girls' side of camp or whatever, but they can't speak. Yeah. But then afterwards I say, do you know how much more powerful you are than your friends? Yeah. Because your friends are scared of silence.
That's a very cool activity. Yeah.
Hi to the both of you. It's been such a wonderful conversation. Steve, I chuckled to myself when you asked about whether or not there were some extreme extroverts watching who have been dealing with the whole craziness that we live in now. And I was like, me. So for most people who know me, I'm always out meeting people. I'm on the phone. I'm texting. I'm on Instagram. I'm like calling people. I'm that social butterfly. So it has been an adjustment, but in many ways, in all honesty, it's been a blessing in disguise, because I feel like I've actually learned a lot more about myself in isolation than I probably ever would have been if I would have never had this opportunity to kind of slow down. And actually, my husband is the polar opposite of me. He is an extreme introvert, so we are total opposites. But I have found a lot of joy in really honestly learning a lot from him being an introvert, and kind of how that reflects on the things about me that I guess I just wasn't paying attention to. And so to Gage's point in her talk about building silence, it is uncomfortable for me, that silence. Yeah. But there is something really that you just, in that silence, you learn something new about yourself that when you take a moment just to breathe. It's
actually one of the reasons it's scary for people, because things come up. And so then you just keep breathing and go on. It's okay. But you do learn things. And so sometimes that's one of the reasons it's a little scary.
Yeah. The other thing that I've also found a lot of joy in with it is actually a feeling here. It's so funny as an extrovert that I never felt that I was always outputting so much energy, but having the moment now to really kind of let that energy be more inward, it's a completely different sentiment. And I don't know if anyone else that is watching or would watch later is feeling the same, but I would hope that they would share their own experiences as extroverts during this time.
Can I ask you one other question, Angelica?
Yeah.
In those moments when you are not learning from your husband or finding your inner strength, you still have a need to recharge through human contact.
Yeah.
What are your strategies there?
So this is one of them.
Smart.
I would be a liar if I didn't say that this was both a wonderful thing I wanted to do for the community, but also something really selfishly that I knew that I wanted to talk to really intelligent people. It's just kind of my thing on a daily. But the other thing too that I've honestly shifted to is phone calls. I've had 2 to 3 hour phone calls that I've never had before.
Yeah. And
then I also downloaded this one app called Marco Polo that takes the same idea of how we used to text I'm just going to text, and then whenever this person gets back to me, they get back to me.
Yeah.
But in a video form. And so I can just basically video message with my family and my friends from around the country. And whenever they get to me is when they get to me. But I get to see their face, and I get to hear their voice, and I get to know in comfort. It helps my anxiety to see them and to hear them, to know that they're safe and that they're healthy. So there's definitely plenty of ways, but I definitely prefer the seeing and hearing people. And I also have a dog, and I smother him. So, I mean,
that helps a lot.
I get my physical from my pet. We do have a question that I wanted to pose from the audience, from Dashelle Young Saver, who asked, what do you think we can do to make our virtual connections more authentic rather than superficial with friends, family, coworkers during this time?
I think there's maybe 3 different answers there would be my first kind of response. But, one of the things that I did in my TEDx talk was start the speech by being quiet for a minute, which was a little counterintuitive in that. And so what I would challenge you to do, particularly with your coworkers, it's a little different dynamic with family and friends, is could you do something where you ask people to be quiet for a moment? And maybe you ask them to write answer to a question, right? But they take a moment to write it, not just respond to it. 1, that gives the introverts a chance to think about it, which they enjoy and appreciate. But 2, it makes everybody sort of be quiet at the beginning of a meeting and refocus from whatever else is going on into the meeting, and then share their answers. And nothing too deep and personal, but, first pet's name, or, you could, whatever, not as an icebreaker, but as a chance to get to know people. But you change the dynamic instead of just working your way around the boxes. You ask people to write out their answer. Maybe you use the chat feature, something that brings quiet into the mix at the beginning changes the dynamic a lot, I think. Steve, I'll let you talk about family and friends or coworkers, but that's one of the ones that occurred to me.
I think a big one for me is carving out the space for intentional connection. Make that the stated goal. Mm-hmm. So the conversation is not about who's going to be cooking with the meal that day, or how the work is going to get done. But how do we assure that when I'm talking to Gage, that is all I am doing? And we make maybe it's a pact, maybe it's a commitment that I'm not going to be looking down at my phone and multitasking. I'm not going to be writing notes on something else. And I'm not going to be,
like that.
as you said, thinking about what my next response is going to be,
Right.
is I'm going to commit to being present.
I like that a lot.
Because if we practice that skill, we can bring that back out of this
Yep.
so much better off than we went into it.
Yep.
So I would recommend this. I've become a big fan of Zoom. I really wasn't much before, or FaceTime, because I know right now you're looking at the screen.
Yep.
There's no reason for me to believe that you're playing a video game, right? And because I know who you are, I know you're fully present. But I think that's the visual aspect of it forces us to be accountable. So I think just simply saying, I care about this conversation too much not to be fully present.
Yeah.
And what do I need to do to make sure that you feel the same way?
Yeah. Oh, I like that a lot.
Well, I just wanted to thank you both again for being here and spending 30 minutes with us today. It has been just such a pleasure to have you both revisit your ideas, especially with the given situation that we're all in. I just wanted to quickly wrap with asking you to weigh in on your final thoughts on what this might mean for the future for us all.
Kate, I'm going to go first because you're going to be happier than I am. Okay. After my talk, one of the short lines in my talk was the early evidence that the younger generation that's become very, very, very tech dependent are having heightened levels of depression, anxiety, and loneliness. And what we were seeing a little bit in 2012 has now become virtually an epidemic. I mean, we now really have a viral epidemic, but I think there was an epidemic of non-connection. And people were substituting social media for real human connection, be that hugs, be that silence, be that a true conversation. And now we have put ourselves in situations where we're telling parents to work a full-time job while their 3 children underfoot. And the natural thing, and the children aren't in school, and we're giving them more devices. And at the very time in our development, nation's emotional development, that I felt like we needed to find a way to get a social media diet, an electronic diet, I feel like we're binging. So I want us to all be thinking real intelligently about how we're going to come out on the other side, not only better from some of the things you and I talked about, but how we can then ramp back down our usage and dependence on technology and social media as connection, because they are to human connection what Haagen-Dazs and Pringles are to real food. Almost there, but not quite enough. So my concern is that the technology is helping us, but we're mainlining it a little more than we should.
Right. Angela didn't leave us with an easy task here. And I don't know that I have an answer. And I think that's one of the reasons that I think it's important that we do this, is that we find some ways to think about that very question, is what do we want to learn from this? Early on, I saw somebody say, it's like, I am not ready to learn from this experience. I'm too much in the middle of it. And I get that. Yeah. On the other hand, as a society, and as a community, what do we need to learn from this? I think, there's some things about us all being in this together. I've loved the reframing about this not being shut in, but this being a communal act for the world. And the idea it's one of the greatest acts of love that we've ever been part of. I mean, what a wonderful way to reframe that. If we could breathe that into our being and take that with us into the future, wouldn't that be wonderful? But we have to stop and choose to do that. We can't just keep solving today's problem and solving today's problem and solving today's problem. We have to do something that helps us have a longer term view of what we want to be different when we come out of this. And my hope is that each of us can find the space to do that. And my bias would be, stop and breathe and think of, have a little quiet to do that. But I think we've got to find a way to choose what we want to come out of this. And my wish would be that we find a way to do that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both again so much for being a part of today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hope to build more silence and connection in my day today as well.
Good for you.
Yeah. Thank you both again. I'm going to wrap up and I'll bring you guys back.
Okay.
Thank you all so much again for joining us for yet another episode of Red Dot Cafe. We've so enjoyed having you all be a part of this live stream. Remember that tomorrow, Thursday, April 9th, we will have Kira Alderman and Alex Bailey, who spoke just last year in the fall, joining us again on Red Dot Cafe. You can also come and find all of our previous episodes on our website at TEDxSanAntonio.com/red.cafe. And if you're seeing the power of ideas manifest in your community, let us know, post to social media, use the hashtag #PowerOfX, and we'll make sure to share it with our friends and fellows. See you all tomorrow and have a wonderful day.